We are live. Let's give you guys a couple minutes to get on here. All right, we got a couple people on already. OC5412, what's going on, man? Legalized Quack, good to see you, man. Glad you're able to join us today. Always happy when you're able to join the chat. Hope you guys that are on here right now. Hope you guys had a good Easter. If you celebrate, hope you guys had a good weekend overall. Mike Myrick, good to see you, man. Doing really good. Hope you're doing well. Go Knowles, as always. So, hope you had a good weekend, Mike. Hope you guys had a good Easter. If you guys celebrate that, we are glad to have you guys on here today, even if it's just for a little bit, for a little Tuesday afternoon live stream. And I can assure you that once summer comes around, we're probably going to be doing a little more prime time live streams. That way, we'll probably get a little more interaction and stuff from you guys, because I know it's difficult to do it in the afternoon. It's just what fits my schedule. But once summer comes around, we're going to be doing a little bit more. So, Mike, it was good, man. I'm glad you had a good weekend. Had a good Easter. My Easter was great, man. I got to stay up here at school, but I got to see my family. I got to go out with a couple friends, had them over for Easter. So, man, I couldn't have asked for anything better. And to make things even better, I've only got about 2 weeks left up here. So, we're slowly ushering our way out. Year one, finishing up. So, it was good, man. I'm glad to hear yours was good, too. When are we starting predictions? Man, we're working on that. I've said a handful of times we've got a pretty big announcement coming out. Today is the 23rd, so probably about the first week of May. OC, we will have a big announcement about that. Predictions usually start in June, mid to late June. We don't have an official date out yet, but I can assure you it'll be somewhere around that time. But stay tuned. Over these next couple of weeks, because we're going to have a big announcement. It's going to be a video, but you're going to want to check Twitter, at Gridiron Expert. You're going to want to check here on YouTube for that video, but you're not going to want to miss it. It's going to be a big deal. Because it's not just like a normal date announcement. We've got a lot of new stuff coming this summer for predictions, and that will carry over into the actual regular season. Some changes that are going to come to this channel. Some things I think are going to bolster us up a little bit, because our subscriber count has declined a little bit in terms of how many we're increasing. We're up to 1,850. I want to be at 2,000 by the end of May, and I think it's a reasonable goal. 150 in about a month. I think that's very reasonable. So hopefully we can get there, and then we're gonna go from there. So, but keep your eye out, man. OC, keep your eye out, because we will be having that date coming up very, very soon. Nicholas Thompson, good to see you, man. I don't know if you've been on the chat before. If it has, it's been a while, but I'm glad to see you. Glad you're able to join us. Do I think Georgia will make the playoffs this season? Well, we're always talking about predictions. Everybody, that's what everybody's favorite topic is. That's my favorite topic, obviously, that we like to talk about, and it kind of fuels our channel here. So I'm not one to give out predictions right now. I'm gonna say no. And actually, we have a lot to talk about with Georgia today, so stay tuned, stay on the stream, because we do have, Georgia just held their spring game this past Saturday, and we will be discussing that a little bit here soon. But do I think they'll make the playoffs? I'm going to say no, because Georgia's schedule extremely difficult. Not saying they can't handle it, but they do have a very difficult schedule. They do have to face Notre Dame. They do have to face an up-and-coming Florida team that I think could really give them a run for their money this year. If Georgia were to make the SEC championship game, which I think right now they are still the favorite to do so, they would more than likely have to face off against Alabama. And we know that Georgia is capable of beating Alabama, even though they didn't do it in the national championship, even though they didn't do it in last year's SEC championship game. They came so close both times that it is very possible they could do that. there's that case, where there's, maybe if Georgia is a 2-loss team, maybe they lose to, let's say Notre Dame. I'm not saying they will, but let's say they lost to Notre Dame and then they lost to Alabama in the SEC championship game. Those are 2 good losses that maybe they could still sneak into the college football playoff. Much like there was that controversy this past season on whether or not Georgia was going to be able to get in after just barely losing to Alabama in the SEC championship game. So, Nick, I'm going to say no right now about Georgia making the playoffs, but it's subject to change. And you can't hold me to that because we got predictions coming out later on where we're going to be really diving into it, into the meat of the schedule, into the rosters and everything else. Stay tuned then when we predict Georgia. Stay tuned for our playoff predictions at the end of all of our other predictions, and that'll be your final answer. OC 540, 54-1-2, 54-12. Who do I think starts at quarterback for Notre Dame? Ian Brooks or the redshirt freshman Phil Jay? Well, okay, it's no-brainer, man. I don't know. That's a question. It's got to be Ian Book. Ian Book came in and really took over for Notre Dame. I mean, if you go back and watch some of the first part of the Notre Dame season, probably the first, let's say, 3 games for the Fighting Irish, and then after that, watch the games where Ian Book started to take over. You see a drastic change in the offense and the production of that Notre Dame offense, of that Notre Dame team. Ian Book was the right man for the job all along, and Brian Kelly didn't really see that early on. I think he's still starting Wimbush, who now has transferred to Central Florida, where I think he will fit in extremely well there. But Ian Book is the man for the job, and I don't really think it's any competition. Now, the thing is, when you have quarterbacks, no quarterback, and they'll tell you this, whether you're in college or you're in pros, can take their job for granted. You can't win the starting job, in 2018 and assume that you've automatically got it in 2019. That's not the case. You still have to outwork the guys that are still coming for your job, because if you keep screwing up, well, maybe you'll get benched. And we saw that last year with Notre Dame. I mean, Wimbush was not doing that great. Ian Book comes in, and you saw a drastic change in the whole, Notre Dame team. So I don't think there's much of a quarterback battle there between Ian and Phil. I really don't see there's any battle there. Ian Book should be the right man for the job, and if he can stay healthy, which he should, then Notre Dame will once again be a playoff contender going into 2019. And a lot of people have them up there. They have a very, not favorable, but when I say favorable, I mean the opportunity to beat solid teams, because we give Notre Dame a lot of crap because they're not part of a conference. And so if they were to slip up once in the regular season, well, that could just diminish their playoff hopes because they don't have a conference championship game, and that hurts them. People are saying they should go join the ACC or somebody like that, and maybe they should. And they've done it in basketball and some other sports, so I don't know why they can't do it in football. Even in the majority of their schedule is actually against ACC opponents, for the most part. So, but I think Ian Book, without a doubt, the starter for the Fighting Irish this season, he will keep them in contention for a playoff berth. Not saying they're going to get there, but they went undefeated last year. The thing is, if Notre Dame were to get all the way to the college football playoff, will they be able to win the big game? I mean, they have been so bad in the big-time games. I mean, you go back to this past year against Clemson in the Cotton Bowl, the national championship back in, 2012. You had the Fiesta Bowls against Ohio State. I mean, you had a handful of big-time games that Notre Dame just was not able to win. And so if they're able to get back there, and someone asked me once, do I think that track record of poor performances in big games would hurt Notre Dame in getting a spot in the playoff? And I said, no, there's no way that, you can't base a team's past performance on whether or not they get into the playoff the next year. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't take Notre Dame's they lost, 27, 23 last year, and to Clemson in the Cotton Bowl. If they were undefeated again, the playoff committee wouldn't say, well, they were really bad last year, so we're just going to hold them out because more than likely they're going to blow it. You can't do that. And so, no, their past woes and the big-time games will never play a factor in the future if they are in a spot for a big-time New Year's Six Bowl or a playoff berth. So, but no, it should be Ian Book, and I'm excited to watch Notre Dame this season because even though they did lose some good production, it wasn't drastic, and they are in the hunt once again for a big-time bowl berth and maybe even getting back to the playoff. I'm interested to see how Brian Kelly is able to conduct his team and maybe just try to change the culture a little bit where they can finally win a big-time game. So that remains to be seen, but I'm excited to see how it all plays out. Nicholas Thompson, do I think Jim Harbaugh will be on the hot seat this season? Well, absolutely. And some people may disagree with that. And if you guys went and looked, if you have read any articles or have looked at social media, wherever, ESPN put out their playoff predictor, and it's mostly based off of the FPI, the Football Power Index, but it is some of the worst college football playoff predictions I've ever seen. And they break it down based on percentage of like the percentage of it likely happening. Like I think the 5% was like Alabama, Clemson, may have been Georgia and Michigan. I can't remember the 4 teams they had in there, but I know it was Alabama, Clemson, and Michigan. And the majority of their playoff predictions had Michigan in the Final Four, in the top 4. And to me, that just doesn't make any sense. I know Michigan's going to be a good team. We can all agree that Michigan is a talented football team and will play well. And I'm not getting away from your question here, Nick. I know we're going to loop it all back to Jim Harbaugh. But like I just mentioned with Notre Dame, in Jim Harbaugh's time with Michigan, he has been unable to win the big-time games. And someone will say, well, what do you mean? Well, he has not beaten Ohio State since he has come to Michigan. And that's a problem. They brought Harbaugh in to beat Ohio State and to get them in contention for the playoff. And he has been in contention for the playoff. You know, there have been 2 matchups against Ohio State in the past 3 years where Michigan has been ranked inside the top 5 and lost both of those games. Had they won both of those games or either of those games, they more than likely would have made the college football playoff. More than likely would have gone to the Big Ten championship, won, and advanced to the college football playoff. And they were unable to do so. And the closest, of course, and probably most heartbreaking, that 30-27 loss just a few years ago, and I believe that being in double overtime, in controversial fashion, if you want to call it that. But Jim Harbaugh has been able to win the big games. He could not win the Peach Bowl last year. Couldn't beat Ohio State. A couple of years ago, blew a huge lead to South Carolina in that bowl game. Lost the Orange Bowl a couple of years ago to Florida State, 33-32. So even though they haven't been playoff caliber, they still haven't been able to win the big-time games. And that is a problem. Regular season Michigan usually plays fairly well until they reach Ohio State. They've had a couple slip-ups here and there, but for the most part, have played fairly well. So I think he is on the hot seat this season, and I think Michigan would be wrong for them to get rid of Jim Harbaugh because Michigan football has actually become relevant once again. They have been tough to beat. They have played well. I don't know if any other coach is going to be able to come in here and get the same type of success that Harbaugh has had, even though the success hasn't been great because they still can't beat Ohio State and can't win the big-time games. But I don't know if any other coach is going to be able to do what Harbaugh has done over these past couple of years. So I'm intrigued to see what happens. Michigan's getting a lot of hype this year. They're going to be a solid team. I'm excited to watch them play. But really, the biggest thing is going to be they've pretty much got to run the table, maybe avoid one slip-up. Maybe they can afford one, but pretty much need to run the table all the way to the Ohio State game. And if they beat Ohio State, they're good to go. If they lose, a lot of questions are going to be coming out about Michigan. You know, last year they were a one-loss team and they faced off against Ohio State. That one loss coming to Notre Dame in the season opener, and that wasn't a big deal because Notre Dame was actually a good team. Went all the way to the college football playoffs. So that was a good loss, and they only lost that game by 7. Michigan has to beat Ohio State. Has to beat Ohio State. If he does not beat Ohio State, fails to make a Big Ten championship, especially with all this hype, there is going to be major concerns about the job security of Jim Harbaugh. And that's just my take, but I think a lot of people can agree with that. And I know Michigan fans are getting very antsy and very, impatient because they've been relevant for a while, but still can't seem to finally just get that breakthrough that they really need. Texas Savage, good to see you, man. One of my moderators on here. What conference do I think Texas will join in 2023? Legalized Quack says, come to the Pac-12. We will trade the Big 12 Colorado. Well, Texas Savage, unless you know something I don't, I think Texas is staying put. Of course, there have been rumors for a very long time about the Big 12 disbanding and kind of breaking off because it's not the Big 12 anymore, obviously. We discussed this in one of our previous live streams, I think last week, about kind of conference realignment, teams that have left other conferences, Nebraska going to the Big 10 from the Big 12, Colorado leaving the Big 12 for Pac-12, Missouri and A&M, Texas A&M going to the SEC. So the Big 12 lost a lot of people, of course. If Texas were to join another conference, which I don't think they will, assuming the Big 12 can stay together, which I think they can, because I think what's more likely to happen is that other teams will come and join the Big 12, more so than teams in the Big 12 leaving and the conference just disbanding as a whole. I think if Texas were to leave, though, a conference or leave the Big 12, the logical place for them would, of course, be the SEC. And that's based on geography, that is based on the money and the revenue that could come into it. The rivalries. I mean, you think about it. You put Texas. Of course, they would have to have another team come in to go on the East. But you put Texas and the SEC West. They would be playing against Texas A&M, so that rivalry would be renewed. Texas and Alabama every single year. I think everybody would love that. They would be playing Arkansas, one of their big time rivals from a long, long time ago, back in the 70s and 80s, 90s, up until Arkansas moved from the Southwest Conference to the Southeastern Conference. They were big-time rivals there. So Texas would have the opportunity to play those teams every single year. And then cross-division games against former Big 12 opponent like a Missouri, or you could play a Georgia or a Florida. That would be the most logical, but it's not going to happen. Texas has too much. They are the big dog. They have the Longhorn Network. That's another thing. We think about it as just being a football game, but there's a lot of logistics that go into it when it comes to money and fan bases. And with Texas having the Longhorn Network, they can't afford to compete. And I say compete, but they're going up against the SEC network, and the SEC network wouldn't allow Texas to air just their games on their network and not put it on the SEC. You get what I'm saying. So there's a lot of logistics that go into it besides just football. But if they were to leave, SEC would be the most logical choice. Now, the question would be there, if they were to move, there are 14 teams in the SEC right now. That would make 8 teams in the West. Who would be the 8th team in the East? Because you have to balance it out. You got to have the same amount of teams on both sides of the division. So who's going to be that 8th team in the East? There were rumors a long, long time ago, or just people talking like, Florida State, Louisville, teams that are around that area, sometimes being in the same state as an already SEC team. Kentucky and Louisville, same state. Florida State, same state. Someone mentioned Georgia Tech once. So, obviously a lot of debate on who that other team in the East would be. But the odds of that happening right now are very slim. It takes a long time for these conference changes to take place. But hey, we've seen crazier things happen, so we never know. Never know. Bradley Fernandez, do I think TJ Vasher at Texas Tech will ever become the all Big 12 player he has the potential to be, or continue to be the guy who can make the spectacular play but not the fundamental play? Well, that's a very good question and a very good point. I like that last part of that. A player that can make a spectacular play but not the fundamental play. And I can go on a little tangent about that here in a second. But Vasher, man, if you guys on the chat, I don't know how many of you are familiar with him and his play, or how many of you have watched Texas Tech games in detail. But as you said, Bradley, a very, very talented player. But to go with what you just said, people that can make a spectacular play, that's great. That's great. That gets the fans riled up, and if you're making a play, that's great. But to be a good overall player, to be the all Big 12 player, like you said, you have to be able to make the fundamental play. Have to be able to make the fundamental play. And I think that's something that's not really taught anymore. People in college football, and you see it in high school football and youth football, and even in the NFL, they want to go for that spectacular play. They want to go for the play that's going to be on SportsCenter top 10 and they're going to be remembered for. But sometimes you make that mistake and say you miss a tackle, or say you try to go for this spectacular interception or one-handed catch or whatever, and then you end up making a mistake and you go from being a top 10 play to a not top 10 play. Fundamentals are everything, and they're not coached as well anymore, and that's unfortunate. And sometimes they are coached, and a player's ego or a player's style of play gets in the way of that. They're coached, but then they're just thinking, oh, I'm going to do what I want. This is what I feel like I'm going to do, and I feel like I'm capable of doing this, and they do it, and they make a mistake. Or sometimes they don't, they go for that spectacular play. But Bradley, to answer your question, yes, he has the potential to do that. Well, you just said it. Become the Big 12 player he has the potential to be. I think he can, and I'm curious to see, with Matt Wells coming in. He's got a new head coach. So that's a new opportunity to kind of change that style, to change the way he has been in the past. So yes, he absolutely, I think, can become that all Big 12 player, no doubt in my mind. But once again, fundamentals, and I stress that in every sport, and not just football, but in basketball. I coached basketball for about 2 or 3 years, and I preach to my players about fundamentals, basic fundamentals, because while everybody, and this is on basketball terms, and you can relate it to football, well, everybody wants to pull, a three-pointer or, a half-court shot or these alley-oops or whatever, and because those are really cool and those are fun to watch and they get, a lot of attention. That's great. Or you could just work on your basic fundamentals and still score some points and win the game. It's a matter of, do you want to be that spectacular player that gets remembered for you, or do you want to benefit your team and get a team win? It's team, it's team versus individual. And then you can lose the cliche, there's no I in team. Well, fundamentals are everything in every single sport, and nowadays they are not getting taught as well as they used to be in years past, and that is very, very unfortunate. But so it goes. But yes, TJ Vasher, very, very talented. I'm excited to see how it all plays out. So many short passes from Bowman last season. We dropped that many from Bowman last season. You're right. Like I said, new coach, new system, new discipline. You work on that. And Bradley, part of that comes to TJ. Part of that comes up to him. How is he going to want to affect his play? Does he, is he going to keep that in mind? Is he going to be like, I want to fix that? Or is he like, oh well, a couple short passes, I may not got that many yards anyways, I'm going to still try to do my own thing. It's a two-way street. Any relationship, coach, player, teacher, student, any type of relationship, friendship, intimate relationship, whatever, it's a two-way street. And it requires each person to give a little bit and take a little bit. You know what I'm saying? To give and take. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out for him. I'm excited to watch Texas Tech this season because it's going to be a brand new style of football compared to what we've seen in years past under Cliff Kingsbury. So Matt Wells, I think he can be the right man for the job. I was not thrilled with that hire. Was kind of concerned with that hire, to be honest with you. I know Texas Tech fans were not necessarily pleased with that hire. But give him a little bit of time. I'm curious to see how Texas Tech fares in Matt Wells' first year with the Red Raiders. Texas Savage, you said that you heard ACC or Big Ten if Texas were to move conferences in 2023. And you say it again here, ACC, Big Ten, or independent. Well, look, it would benefit Texas more to remain in a conference. I can assure you of that. It's going to be much better for Texas, especially now that Texas is, as they would say, back. And Texas is back. Because we just talked about Notre Dame. And Trey, I saw your comment about Notre Dame, and I'll get there. Nick, I saw your comment there, and I'll look at that here in a second too. But it would not benefit Texas to be an independent, like we mentioned with Notre Dame, because with Texas actually becoming relevant again and being now in contention for a Big 12 championship and maybe some people in their minds a dark horse playoff pick, to go independent and take away that conference championship, especially now that the Big 12 has added a conference championship back, because for a while there they didn't have a conference championship game, it would not benefit them. The ACC, geographically, does not make any sense. Big 10 maybe makes a little more sense, but not that much. If Big 12 is perfect for Texas. But if the Big 12 were to disband because other people decided to leave, or Texas just had that urge to leave the Big 12, which I don't know why they would, because Texas has always been in that type of, they were in the Southwest Conference, and really a lot of teams from the Southwest Conference kind of became the Big 12 Conference. I know back then the Southwest had teams like, they had SMU and they had Rice, but there were a handful of teams in there that kind of became the Big 12, TCU in Texas, Oklahoma, Texas A&M before they moved to the SEC, Baylor, to teams like that are still in the Big 12. Texas does not need to move to any other conference unless it would be the SEC. And that isn't me, some people say, oh, you're saying that because you're an SEC homer, which I'm not. That is the most logical conference move for the Longhorns, but I think the most logical move in the grand scheme is to stay put. I think they had the best chance of winning a championship in the Big 12. And we're already seeing that now. They can beat Oklahoma. They're up-and-comers. Baylor's up-and-coming. Iowa State's up-and-coming. TCU is a team that's always, maybe they have one bad year. The next year they win 11 games, so they're tough. It's a good conference. They don't get a lot of credit, especially for playing defense, but it's not a bad conference. And we just need to be – I think Texas needs to stay put there. And it's 2019 right now. You're 4 years out from 2023. Unless there have already been talks, I think there's nothing's going to change. And I wouldn't want to change if I were a Texas fan or a member of the Texas program, because it makes more sense to stick around in the Big 12. So, Trey, sticking with this kind of conference deal here, you mentioned, do I think Notre Dame will ever give up independence, or staying an independent? And I think they are slowly moving that way. I think Notre Dame, the administration there and the program there, they know deep down that they will benefit more if they were to go to a conference. And like I said, we've seen that in multiple other sports for the Fighting Irish. I mean, the big one is basketball. They are in the ACC in basketball, and that helps them. And it would make sense for Notre Dame to be in the ACC. Geographically, it would make more sense for them to be in the Big Ten, but the majority of their schedule is against ACC teams. Go look at Notre Dame's schedule this year and from the past couple of years. A lot of their opponents come from that conference. They have a couple here and there that aren't. You know, they've played Texas a couple years. They got Georgia this year, played Georgia a few years back. So they do have those big name schools that they play that are outside of the ACC, but the majority of their opponents are from the ACC. And it would just make sense for them to go there. It makes sense for them to stay consistent with the other programs at the school. But will they give it up? No, they're too stubborn. That football program is too stubborn. I think they like having the independence, getting to schedule who they want, when they want, knowing if we go undefeated, it's going to be pretty hard for the playoff committee now to leave out an undefeated Notre Dame team, who granted, if they do go undefeated, they had some solid wins last year. Let's not take anything away from that. It's not like they're scheduling cupcake teams all the way through. Majority of their opponents are Power 5. They might not be great Power 5s, but they are. Like I said, this year they've got Georgia. Last year they had Michigan. They've played Florida State a couple times. They had Syracuse last year, and Syracuse was a good team that last year. So nothing to take away from Notre Dame by any means whatsoever. But I don't think they're going to give up the independence, and that's unfortunate. More unfortunate for them. As a fan, as we as college football fans, it doesn't really matter to us. But I know a lot of people are frustrated with Notre Dame because they go undefeated and they're not in a conference. Also, it would benefit the Fighting Irish to join a conference because, as I mentioned earlier, you see a lot of teams nowadays in the college football playoff that can't afford to have one loss. You get a one-loss team in there. Now sometimes you have people that are in there with 2 losses or in contention with 2 losses. Notre Dame, 2 losses, no way they get in. 1 loss, chances diminish greatly. And that's because they don't have a conference championship game, and because when you're scheduling independence, you can kind of, we've had this conversation before where when you're in a conference, you can determine how good or bad a team is. If I'm in the SEC East, for example, I can't change how well Vanderbilt plays or how well Tennessee plays or South Carolina. That's up to them. Obviously, I can't affect that. You can affect who you schedule out of the non-conference, but you can't change who you play in conference. I think that benefits a lot of teams because the playoff committee can look at that and be like, well, yeah, they say strength of schedule, but if you schedule some solid non-conference opponents, that makes up for some of the weak opponents that you play in your conference because you can't help that. Notre Dame can help every single person they put on their schedule. But you move to a conference like the ACC, you can't help who you play in the ACC because you're put in a division. You can't help who you play in the non-conference. You slip up once in the ACC, maybe you lose to a Clemson, maybe you lose to a Miami, someone like that. That's fine. You still make a conference championship game and win it, you're getting in with that 1 loss. But as an independent with a 1 loss, you can forget it. So that's it. That's my take. So Trey, do I think they're going to give it up? No. But should they? Absolutely. Little rant on Notre Dame there. Got nothing against the Fighting Irish by any means. That's just my personal take on that. And I think a lot of people agree with me on that as well. I think a lot of people know that's what Notre Dame needs to do, but they're just too stubborn to do so. Nicholas Thompson, do I see Texas winning the Big 12 championship game this season? And do I think this is Gus Malzahn's last year at Auburn? So a 2-parter here. And Bradley, I saw your comment down there about current coaches, and I like that question, so I'm going to get to that after I answer Nick's question here. Do I see Texas win the Big 12 championship game this season? Once again, Nick, I'm not releasing any predictions right now because those are always subject to change, and our official ones are going to come out later on in the year, but I think right now it is a 2-team race in the Big 12, and that is, of course, between Oklahoma and Texas. And as I mentioned, last year I can tell you what, we already know this year Texas is capable of beating Oklahoma. They beat Oklahoma last year in the regular season, fell to them in the Big 12 championship game, so part 2, but then Texas annihilates Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. So a lot of momentum coming into the season for the Longhorns, a lot of talent returning for Texas this year. So no doubt in my mind that they can win the Big 12 championship. Oklahoma, though, is their roadblock. Even if they were to beat Oklahoma in the regular season again, more than likely they would have to face off against the Sooners in the Big 12 championship game. And it is tough, especially in college football, to beat the same team twice. We see it in the NFL. If you have an interdivision game, you're going to have to play that same team twice. The Patriots play the Jets, the Dolphins, and the Bills 2 times a year. Same for any other team in another division in the NFL. That's tough to do in college. More tough to do in college, I think, in my opinion. Oklahoma, of course, now adding Jalen Hurts, another solid dual threat quarterback that Texas is going to have to worry about. And I know his game is going to develop and be really, really good under Lincoln Riley. We've seen him do that with Baker Mayfield. We've seen him do it with Kyler Murray, and I wouldn't expect anything less here with Jalen Hurts. So that's a 2-team race. Now, keep in mind, teams like Iowa State, especially, Baylor, and I would even throw TCU in there, are teams that are up and coming and could challenge Oklahoma and Texas, and not necessarily for that Big 12 crown, but pull off an upset there. And I would say I would lean more towards the Iowa State side on that, saying that Iowa State has a really good chance of upsetting either Texas or Oklahoma. And I think an ESPN analyst, I can't remember the name of the guy, but put out an article recently saying that he thinks that the biggest game in the Big 12 this season will not be Oklahoma-Texas, what will be Texas and Iowa State. And that's extremely possible because the Cyclones are really, really moving up and are becoming a bigger threat in the Big 12. So I'm not going to go as far as say Texas will win the Big 12 this year. I can't say that now. I haven't predicted anything yet. Stay tuned in the summer, though. You will know who I picked to win the Big 12. But right now, I think it's a 2-team race, Oklahoma, Texas. But the gap is closing between the two with guys like, as I mentioned, Iowa State, Baylor, TCU. Someone might want to say Texas Tech. I'm not going to go that far yet because I don't think they're going to have great success in year 1 under Matt Wells, but could be that way after a few years. Bradley Fernandez, I like this question a lot. Great discussion here. What current coach would I want my son to learn and develop under? And on the other hand, who would I want to play for? So it's another two-parter here. Me personally, then if I had a son playing football, who would I want him to learn under? Well, I think the immediate answer for most people, Bradley, is going to be Nick Saban. That's not my final answer, but I think that is the immediate answer because he's the best in the business. He's tough. Don't get me wrong. He's a tough guy, and you look around, and there's something to be said for, and Jalen Hurts can attest for this, something to be said for, having fun, but also getting coached. He was having a blast at the Oklahoma spring game, and I remember him making the comment saying, this type of stuff wouldn't fly at Alabama. The stuff that I'm doing here, and it wasn't like he was doing anything bad. He was just celebrating and having a good time. But that type of behavior wouldn't fly. Nick Saban and Bill Belichick are very similar in the sense they run their team like a business, like an office. You have a conduct. You're going to come in here. This is how you're going to do things. And if you don't like it, then you're going to get out or you're not going to play. So I would probably, me personally, would probably want. I know I would want to play for Nick Saban. And the reason I say that is because me as a personality, I can handle. Some people can't handle it. But I know I could handle the criticism and the harshness because while Nick Saban, he's tough on those players, but he's tough on them because he's making them better. And you go look at a lot of Alabama players that have gone on to have success in the NFL, or just the amount of Alabama players that have gotten drafted into the NFL, a lot of that comes from Nick Saban and how well he has coached these players and how well he knows the game of football. So I would want to play for him because I know that when I get done, whether I go to the NFL or not, after 4 years in that Alabama football program, I'm going to be a much better player than I was when I came out. I could say the same for my son if he were to go play for them. I think he would learn the best. I think he would get the best out of Nick Saban and his coaching staff there because even then you see a lot of Nick Saban's coaching staff going on to be head coaches later on. So I think me and my son, I would want to play under a coach that has that fire and that enthusiasm and has that passion for the game. You have seen there are a lot of coaches out there that do not have that. A lot of coaches out there that just sit there on the sideline, don't really show much emotion, don't really seem to care. And I know they do. I know they're not just like, I don't care if we win or lose. I know they want to go out there and win. But I would want to play for a coach that obviously wants what's best for me, but a coach that's going to get into the ref's face, going to get into my face when I screw up, get into my teammates' face when we screw up, because that's what makes you better. And I think you see that out of Nick Saban, you see that out of Kirby Smart. I was a huge fan, over his entire career, of Bobby Petrino because of the fire and the intensity that he brought to his teams. So not just that he had Louisville, both stints, did Arkansas, was not successful in the NFL, of course, with the Falcons. But that intensity and that fire that he brought to every team that he coached, Western Kentucky even, I really enjoyed that. So I would want to play for a coach that has that type of fire. I wouldn't want to go play for a coach that, plays slap ass at practice, doesn't really care at the games, doesn't have that fire. Yes, he knows what he's doing, but I need that coach that's going to have that intensity and that fire. If the coach is too laid back, that's not the coach for me, and certainly not going to be the coach for my son. So, very good question, though, and I like that. That's kind of an interesting thing. I'd love to hear your take. Who would you want to play under, Bradley? Would you want to play? I could tell you were asking questions, I think, here about Texas Tech. So, would you have wanted to play under Cliff Kingsbury? Would you want to play under Matt Wells, Mike Leach, former Texas Tech head coach? That's a really, there are so many great coaches out there that I really, especially in the Power 5, that I really couldn't complain with too many of them that I could potentially be coached by. So, Saban, Smart, I like Mike Leach a lot. Les Miles over at Kansas, he would probably be a fun coach to be, be coaching with or coaching under. Tom Herman at Texas, Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma. Some of the big dogs out there, what I would enjoy. Jimbo Fisher, Texas A&M, I think that'd be fun. So many out there that just know the game so well, but also going to bring that fire and that intensity to not want what's best for you, but want what's best for the team as well. Natural born winners. Nicholas Thompson, I forgot. I didn't hit both of your parts of your question there. Do I think Gus Malzahn, this is his last year at Auburn if he loses to Oregon? Yes. And that to me is a no-brainer, Nick. And you know what I'm going to do right now for you? This has been a hot topic for a lot of people on whether or not, Auburn is going to get rid of Gus Malzahn, because they signed him to a brand new contract just 2 years ago, and it was like $50 million because there were rumors that he was going to be leaving to take the Arkansas job 2 years ago. Auburn, though, so 2 years ago they get to the SEC championship game. They win that, they're going to the playoff, but they fall to Georgia like 28-7, and then they fall to Central Florida in the Peach Bowl. So a horrible ending to what was a good year for Auburn. They come in last season, high expectations. I mean, huge expectations for Auburn. I mean, the team that had just beaten Alabama, a team that had gotten to the SEC championship game, which is a game away from playing in the college football playoff. Huge expectations for Auburn. And I just pulled up their schedule from last year and this coming year. We'll look at both briefly just to touch on this Malzahn thing a little bit. Last year, they opened the season against Washington, so a big-time game against a high-quality opponent. And I remember saying a lot last year that was like a college football play-in game. Two teams that had high hopes for making the college football playoff. The winner of that is going to get a huge resume booster. The other team doesn't ruin their playoff hopes, but would almost need them to win out. Auburn starts off 2-0 with that win over Washington, but loses to LSU. And that was a pretty big upset because LSU, even though they annihilated Miami in week 1, still had some questions there. That game was at Jordan-Hare. They lost by 1 point, 22-21. Then they lost back-to-back games to Mississippi State, understandable. But what was really the downfall for Auburn was losing again at home to Tennessee, 30-24. Auburn had a lot of talent last season, and they did not utilize it in the best way. Lost to Tennessee, 30-24. That was really the beginning of the end for Auburn. Lost 2 of their last 3. Lost to Georgia, 27-10. Lost to Alabama, 52-21. Annihilated Purdue in the Music City Bowl, 63-14 to finish 8-5. Really, really disappointing year. 7-5 in the regular season for Auburn, who had hopes of making the SEC championship game in the playoff. They're getting a lot of hype again this year. Malzahn is going to be out, though, after this season, I think, because it's, once again, is a very, very tough schedule. And I don't really have a lot of faith in this Auburn team. Now, we talked about it a couple weeks ago about the quarterback play and how they have some very, very capable quarterbacks and very capable wide receivers, and maybe Auburn will do what they've done in years past and just surprise the heck out of everybody and just kind of go on a little run here and kind of shock everybody. And then that game against Alabama in the Iron Bowl is like a play-in game for the SEC championship. You never know. But Oregon, a team that I'm really high on, just held their spring game this past Saturday. Justin Herbert, had he declared, would probably be a first-round draft pick in this Thursday's NFL draft. But he decided to stick around, so a very talented quarterback. Even though Auburn has some good ones, Oregon owns the edge there, without a doubt in my mind. A defense that does not get a lot of credit for the Ducks. I've said it before, I'll say it again, and wait again until summer. Maybe something will change, but probably not. I think Oregon does beat Auburn in week 1. A couple weeks later, they have to go to Texas A&M, another team that's getting a lot of hype, especially in year 2 under Jimbo Fisher, especially the way they ended last season. Not an easy place to play. Have to go to Florida. And this is a dangerous Florida team. dangerous Florida team, and under Dan Mullen, I think I think they're by far Georgia's biggest threat to in the SEC East, and some people even have them as a playoff dark horse. They have to go to LSU. They get to host Georgia and Alabama, but at LSU, at Florida, at Texas A&M, neutral site Oregon. I mean, I'm not predicting a record right now. I'm not, because that's not what we're going to do. But there are potentially 4 losses on that schedule already. It is going to be a tough season for Auburn, and I think if they lose 4 games or more in this season, Gus Malzahn will be out, and that's unfortunate for him. I question if Auburn will do it because of that contract they signed him to just a few years ago. I don't know if they would go that far, but if he's not producing the results, Auburn has kind of gotten, I don't want to say spoiled, that's almost the wrong word, but they are a very historic program, have played extremely well, won a national championship with Cam Newton back in 2010. They won they got back to the national championship a few years ago. Malzahn's first year lost to Florida State. Have been in the running for the playoff for a handful of years, but four losses or more next year, I think that ends the Malzahn tenure with the Tigers, because they get very overhyped and sometimes don't produce the results. Henry H., good to see you, man. What's a team that gets overhyped every season? Well, I'll say right now, one of them is Auburn. And that's not me hating on Auburn by any means, not a doubt, but Auburn gets overhyped every year. And we say overhyped, a team that gets a lot of attention, and if they come out and they live up to the hype, that's great. They deserved it. They deserve to get that hype. They deserve, and that's great that they played that way. But 9 times out of 10, they don't. So a team that gets overhyped every season, Auburn's one of them, but one of them that's even bigger than that is USC, Southern California. My God, do they get overhyped every single year. Sometimes they own up to it. Sometimes they live up to it. But I can remember back, 2010, 2011, 2012, they would start off the year, number 1 in the country, number 3 in the country. And then within, by the end of September, they were irrelevant. So USC, a team that gets overhyped every year. And sometimes, like I said, they do live up to that hype. They live up to those high expectations. But USC, a team that I think gets overhyped every year. I know we just mentioned Auburn was the one that got overhyped. I think Miami is one that can at times get overhyped. I know a lot of people are expecting big things this year. I'm not. First year, new coach, Manny Diaz, coming in, trying to work out the quarterback situation there. Is it going to be Tate Martell? Is it going to be N'Kosi Perry? Because I think those are the two that they're going to come down to. So, it's a lot of logistics that go into it, guys. But I think those are some big three there that get really overhyped year in and year out. Tennessee could be one. And the question is, are they getting overhyped by the fans, like the fans of that program, or overhyped by like the media, like the big-time media? That's another question, because every fan wants to believe that their team is going to, win the national championship or be a playoff contender or, go to their conference championship or just get, 7, 8, 9 wins. Every team wants to believe that, and the fans are going to be a little biased, of course, towards their favorite team. But sometimes the media is a little biased themselves. I think Tennessee's certainly one that's up there a lot, especially, and you notice that in the media too. The fans are always hyped about it, but the media, Michigan, another one. I mean, the list could go on and on, Henry. Honestly, I mean, I can make a list of you of teams that the media and their fans just rave about all offseason long. And, maybe they'd end up having a good year. Maybe they do win 9 or 10 games, but maybe what they were thinking was that they were going to go win a national championship or go to the playoff. And if you go into a season with that type of expectation and win 9 or 10 games, for most programs, that's a really, really good year. But if I had playoff expectations and I only won 9 games, I think I'd be a little disappointed. So it just depends. Nicholas Thompson, I see Arkansas going 7-5, and I see LSU going 10-2. All right, well, I'll make a note of that. 7-5 for Arkansas, 10-2 for LSU. I like keeping up with other people's predictions, Nick. That wasn't me calling you out. I like keeping up with that because we'll see what I pick them, both Arkansas and LSU, come June and July. What I have the Razorbacks and the Tigers doing there, and that's one of the things that I love about prediction season is when you guys comment on my prediction videos, sharing your predictions. Sometimes you agree with them. Sometimes you're like, you had a guy going 8-4. I think they go 9-3 with the win over this. Change this game to that. It doesn't matter. I love it. So I love hearing other people's predictions as well, and y'all's opinions. So 7-5 for the Razorbacks. That should be huge improvement under Chad Morris. 10-2 in year one, going from 2 wins to 7 wins. That's a huge jump. That reminds me a lot of what Matt Rule did at Baylor last year, going from 1-11 to 6-6, and then winning that bowl game over Vanderbilt. So that would be huge for the Razorbacks and a major step in the right direction. Although I think 7-5 might be a little too much. I might even, like I said, just off the top of my head, flip-flop those numbers and have the Razorbacks going 5-7. But you never know. You never know. I don't think many people thought Baylor would go from 1 win to 7 wins, really, after this abysmal year they had in year one. So Bradley, I like this one here. We were discussing coaches that you would want to play under, or maybe have your son play for, and throwing a curveball and saying Matt Campbell. Really like how promising he is and what he's done so far in Ames and Iowa. Would love to be a part of the process, and I do like that. And I've mentioned that's he is a great coach, and I was somewhat skeptical when they announced that he was going to go take the Iowa State job, because Iowa State, man, that's a tough place to win. They have one of the toughest environments to win in, yet Iowa State for years on end just could not ever really get anywhere. And they were always 2-10 or 3-9, maybe you go up to 4-8, but they made a bowl game, I think, in 2012, 2013, somewhere around there. But for the most part, they were just never getting anywhere. I remember one of the biggest upsets they ever pulled was, of course, back in 2011, that big-time upset in Ames over Oklahoma State. At the time was, I think, number 2. But I like that, though, playing under Matt Campbell, and that would be a really fun coach to play in. I mentioned earlier a coach that I need to see passion out of, intensity, wanting the best for his players, but wanting the best for his team, and that drive to win. And I have certainly seen that over these past couple of years under Campbell. And like you said, part of the process, he has built them up quick. Not just to where, like, oh, hey, we're going 6-6, making a bowl game. He has got them to contending in the Big 12. Last year, up until the final week or final 2 weeks of the season, they were technically still in the hunt for the Big 12 championship. Now, the odds of them getting in there were slim. They had to have a lot happen for them. But they were still in the hunt. Made a great bowl game, the Alamo Bowl, hung with Washington State in that one. So I do like that. I think it's a great coach. And Iowa State's got themselves a great coach there. As I said earlier, Iowa State is a team that really could put a foil into plans, a wrinkle in some of the plans for Texas and Oklahoma. And as some analysts have said, they believe that Texas and Iowa State game is going to be even more important in determining who wins the Big 12 than Oklahoma and Texas. Iowa State certainly trending in the right direction. And if Mitch Thayer was on here, I know he would certainly be agreeing with us. I wish he was hearing this right now. Diehard Iowa State fan, so I wish he was catching this. Hopefully he'll come on later or catch the stream later, and maybe he'll leave a comment or something. So you're a student at Texas Tech, Bradley, and you were skeptical of Matt Wells, but from what I've seen so far from Texas Tech football reports and social media posts, I guess it cut off there, but Matt Wells coming over from Utah State, a skeptical hire. As you said, you were skeptical. I was skeptical. I think a lot of people were. I know a lot of Texas Tech fans were skeptical. You're saying that Matt Wells is very involved and welcoming of the media, unlike Kingsbury, and I feel like he's going to make the most of his opportunity versus a coach from another Power 5 conference. Well, maybe so. I have no doubt that Matt Wells is a good coach. You go look at some of the offensive numbers that he put up at Utah State. They were good. Texas Tech kind of used to this air raid offense, the type of just slinging it around. You got Bowman, you had Patrick Mahomes, Mayfield was there, of course, before he transferred to Oklahoma. So they have kind of relied on their quarterback, not much on the run game. Matt Wells might come in here and try to implement the run game a little bit more, which is something that's not very common in the Big 12, especially with the high-octane offenses that other teams have. Texas, Oklahoma, Baylor. You go back and look at the Baylor teams from years past with like Art Briles and how dangerous they were, especially with their passing game. So, but you're right. You're right. I think Matt Wells, long-term, right man for the job. But Bradley, if you're a student at Texas Tech, and I'm glad you're here with us. Tell your people at Texas Tech to be patient with Matt Wells. Same for you. Although you seem like you have your mood has changed. Your opinion has changed on him, and most times coaches do that. Most times you get skeptical, and then as you see them, how they conduct with their team and how they handle with the media, you learn to like them a little bit. But be patient, because I don't think this first year at Tech is going to be great for them. Could be wrong. He could surprise everybody. And I think by a surprise would mean getting them to a bowl game, winning 6 games or 7 games. But be patient, because I think long term he's going to be the right man for the job, and really could play some defense at Texas Tech, and which would be kind of a shot, because Cliff Kingsbury's teams didn't do that. But that's really interesting. I like the Matt Campbell pick, and I like that your opinion has changed a little bit of Matt Wells. That's pretty interesting. Mine has too. Like as you said, as I did a little more research on him, which I'm not getting as much, I think, as you have, being a student there, getting more inside scoops and being around that program a little bit more than me. That's a benefit for you, but my opinion certainly has changed from what I have seen. Nicholas Thompson, why did I think Dana Holgorsen went to Houston, leaving West Virginia for Houston? And Nick, we've done a video over head coaching changes, kind of listing our top 5. We've discussed it here in a couple of these live streams, but I will say that a major reason that Holgorsen left West Virginia for Houston was because he was formerly an offensive coordinator for the Cougars back in, I think, 2008, 2009, before he left for that West Virginia job. Now, as I've stressed over and over and over again, it is extremely difficult to take a coach from a Power 5 school and bring him back to a Group of 5 school. That's a tough thing to do. But I think Dana Holgorsen almost knows that he has a better chance of winning, I'm not going to say playoff berths, but getting to New Year's Six bowl games and really almost being, excuse this, but like a god, a god at Houston than he was at West Virginia. Now, his West Virginia teams were not bad. He had some very high-octane offenses there. We saw that this past year with Will Grier and David Sills and a defense that was improving. Was in the running for a Big 12 championship game appearance up until that final week of the season when they lost in that shootout to Oklahoma. But he's coming to Houston, a place he's familiar with, a place where the fans are going to be really excited, and that type of offense that he had at West Virginia, he's going to bring that style back over to Houston. And I can't use the term make them relevant again, because Houston has been relevant for the past couple of years. They were relevant under Tom Herman, what they did with him, rising as high as number 6 in the rankings at one point, winning that Peach Bowl over Florida State, beating Oklahoma, playing extremely well. Major Applewhite didn't get the job done there. He's going to get the job done at Houston. Had a wonderful opportunity this season against, I think, Oklahoma and Washington State. I think there's a very good chance that Houston could beat either one of those schools. I would lean more towards the Washington State side than the Oklahoma side, but with De'Aaron King at quarterback, Holgorsen's already got a very solid offense in place, which is kind of a difficult thing to do for a new head coach. But he inherits quite a bit of talent in just year one. Houston's going to be a contender in the American Athletic, challenging UCF. You might even see them make a New Year's Six bowl, maybe this year, if not, maybe the year after, and could get them back in contention to be in that school where they can maybe be the first Group of 5 team to make the college football playoff. And I know that's bold, but you look at a team like UCF, who went undefeated for 2 straight years. Extremely impressive. But who did they beat in the regular season? Nobody really that important, nobody that impressive. Houston has the liberty and has done a great job of scheduling tough non-conference opponents on top of just running through and demolishing the AAC. If they were to beat Oklahoma and Washington State, win out through the entire conference slate of the American Athletic, plus winning the American Athletic Conference Championship game, you can make a very, very strong case for Houston to make the college football playoff. And I think Holgorsen will have one of those years, not this year, but somewhere down the road, because Houston does schedule tough opponents, unlike UCF does. They're not afraid of that. And Houston has been known to beat those schools, much like we have seen in their bowl appearances, and much like we saw in that regular season opener against Oklahoma a few years ago. So it's possible, and that's the only way a Group of 5 school is going to be able to ever get into the playoff, is by scheduling those top teams in the non-conference, running through the conference slate, winning your conference, and then just hoping you can slip into the top 4. It's going to be a very difficult thing to do, but he has a very good chance to do that here at Houston, and that's why he left, Nick. I know that was a very thought-out, long answer to a very simple question, but he went there because he's familiar with that. He had connections there, and I think he knows deep down that he's going to have better success, and really not going to have this burden on him as much as he did at West Virginia. Because when you're in a Power 5 conference, West Virginia wanted, and rightfully so, wanted to compete for a Big 12 championship, wanted to compete at the national level. He got them there a handful of times, but couldn't do it consistently. He's going to have Houston in contention for the American Athletic Conference title consistently, year in and year out. I have no doubt in my mind. So Bradley, still talking about Matt Wells here, says he seems determined to have success at Texas Tech. If we had hired someone like Holgorsen, he could have seen this as another job. Wells is also hard on his players, is already establishing a culture, which is extremely important, kind of going along the lines of what we were talking about earlier about who you want to play for. You said that he's trying to establish a culture that resembles what Chris Beard has done with the basketball program. I like that comparison there. Hard-working mentality, making use of the transfer market. Well, the transfer market in both in football and basketball, extremely, extremely important. And what you said here about Matt Wells trying to see that he really wants to establish this culture and someone like he really wants to have success here, there's something to be said for that because Matt Wells is coming from a group of 5 school. And you think about that for a second, I think sometimes a group of 5 coach, and not to take away from any other Power 5 coach, but a group of 5 coach has a bigger kind of chip on their shoulder to say, all right, I've done well in the group of 5, but they don't get much respect. They're playing lesser opponents, even though Utah State was in the Mountain West, had some difficult opponents at times. So when you come to this Power 5 school, you want to prove that, yeah, I mean, that was great that I could win in the group of 5, but now I'm playing with the big dogs. I'm in the big league now, and I feel more determined to win in the Power 5 to show that, yeah, I mean, winning in the group of 5 isn't a fluke, or it wasn't just a piece of cake. Like, I'm a good coach. I can win no matter where I go. And like you said that's a very good comparison. Chris Beard, coming from Arkansas Little Rock, did extremely well. I think he was only there for like 1 year. But in that 1 year, nearly went undefeated with the Trojans, had a great year with them, got all the way, won the Sun Belt, went to the NCAA tournament as a 12 seed, beat Purdue in overtime. They were the 5 seed, lost to Iowa State in the round of 32. But a phenomenal first year. Comes to the Power 5 to coach Texas Tech, a place that he was also familiar with. Has done extremely well there, but wants to prove that what he did at UALR at Arkansas Little Rock was not a fluke. That's a very good comparison. So I like the comparison there. And what you've said there, building a mentality, building a culture within your team, within the locker room, to know what's expected of them, to have everyone buy in. That's a very difficult thing to do as being a new head coach, but over time, as these players start to build in, as you start to see the coaches buy into their own mentality, because it's a give and take thing. You can't tell people to act one way and you act a completely other way. Or you can't tell players to do something if you're not going to do it yourself. It is a team thing. It is a group thing, a mentality and a culture. And Chris Beard already did that, but going all the way to the national championship this year. So obviously has built that, and the players have bought into it. But I think Matt Wells can do that within a few years as well. And you've already given me more insight than I think other people have. And obviously you're more familiar with Matt Wells and his mentality and what he's been doing for that program than I have, because, of course, I don't go to school there. So that's very, very good analogies there, very good comparisons. And like as I said, I'm excited to see how he fares in year 1 with Texas Tech. Red Raider fans just need to be patient with him, because while he might not do great in year 1, I think long-term he is going to be the right man for the job. No doubt in my mind. And he did phenomenal things at Utah State. And I think people were worried about the offensive change, coming back over, can he produce the same amount of offense that he did at Utah State here at Texas Tech? What about the defense? I think I really think the defensive side of the ball is going to improve greatly under Matt Wells within the next 2 years. This season and next season, you're going to see some drastic change defensively. And that's going to be very, very important for Texas Tech. And the league, as I've said over and over again, is known for offense, not known for defense. But if you have a team that can put up a lot of points and actually play just a little bit of defense in the Big 12, you could be looking at your next Big 12 champion, because most of these teams struggle defensively. But if you have an offense that is able to put up 30, 40 points a game like some of these teams do, but you can play a little bit of defense as well, you're going to be tough to stop in a conference like the Big 12. They say defense wins championships, and that is certainly true. No doubt in my mind. So very good discussion there, Bradley. I appreciate the insight. Appreciate the question. It was first off an intriguing question about who you'd want to play for, and then diving in a little bit into your alma mater, into where you are attending now, Texas Tech. So, and once again, thank you for joining us. I haven't seen you in a while, so I'm glad you were able to join in and really brought some great discussion and insight there. So we're hitting about the hour mark, guys, and we are going to answer a few more questions. Then we're going to bolt here, and of course we'll be back on Thursday for a live stream. Checking Twitter. Make sure you do that at Gridiron Expert. Follow us if you don't. Subscribe here if you haven't already. That would be a lot for us. We're going to, like I said, answer a few more questions here, and then we're going to get out of here. We had a lot of notes here. I had a notebook full for the spring games that just took place this past Saturday. Of course, also we have the NFL draft coming up on Thursday, so we'll of course talk about that a little bit on our Thursday live stream. And I'm hoping to have some content out by tomorrow or Thursday morning for some NFL draft coverage as well, because that's a very big deal, talking about some of the biggest college football players trying to take the next step in their career. So it's always one of my favorite times of year and something that I really enjoy watching. So we'll keep our eye out for that. Live stream Thursday. Check Twitter for the time, at Gridiron Expert. Follow us there. Make sure you have those alert notifications on, both here on YouTube and at Twitter, so you don't miss a single thing that we do here at the Gridiron Expert. So the last question here from Bradley. I like this right here. Between the Tuberville or Kingsbury area, which do you think was the bigger failure? And I'm going to... That's a tough question. That's really good. But I'm going to have to go with Kingsbury because... he was kind of that golden boy, had played at Texas Tech, had this brilliant offensive mind, came in with this new style. And if you remember Texas Tech's first year under Cliff Kingsbury, he got them pretty high up in the rankings. I almost want to say he got them to number 10 in the country at one point. Had a phenomenal start. After that, Texas Tech went to nothing. I mean, honestly, he was struggling to get the ball. I think they started off at number 10, went like this long losing streak. Couldn't win in the bowl games, could hardly get to bowl games. I was surprised that they kept Cliff Kingsbury as long as they did. And I remember last year in the offseason saying that if he didn't get to a bowl game in 2018, he was out. And sure enough, he was. And I know some of that, you had some injuries. I know last year they had a lot of quarterback injuries. Defensively, never really clicked and got to the point where they needed to be. I feel like they wasted a decent amount of talent. And especially with that quarterback in Patrick Mahomes, a heck of a gunslinger, put up some big-time stats, but never could really compete in the Big 12, and that's really unfortunate. So I would say he probably was a bigger failure compared to him and Tommy Tuberville. I'm going to have to go with Kingsbury there. But I mean, that's a choice between a Texas Tech fan. It's always up to you guys as well. Last thing, can't believe a coach who failed at the collegiate level was hired. Well, that's the biggest shock to me as well, Bradley, honestly. That was my biggest shock out of everything. When the Cardinals announced they were hiring him, I can't imagine being a Cardinal fan. If you can't win at Texas Tech at the collegiate level, what makes one believe they can win at the NFL? And I know they're two completely different games. Maybe Kingsbury just couldn't coach college players. There's something to be said for that. Maybe he was unable to do that. But to get hired by the Arizona Cardinals, who are now potentially going to draft Kyler Murray as the number 1 pick, which I disagree with wholeheartedly, but maybe they will, maybe they won't. There's rumors out they won't even consider him at 1. Who knows? We're going to have to wait and find out on Thursday. But that was a major shock. The Cardinals fired, I think it was Steve Wilks after 1 season with the Cardinals. Will they do the same for Kingsbury? Because I don't think he's going to have great success in year 1. We're going to see, I think this is almost like a test. It's going to see, can he show improvement from last year's Cardinal team? Can he get a quarterback developed? He has a great offensive mind, no doubt. Brilliant offensive mind, and that's part of the reason Texas Tech hired him. So if he can show some improvement offensively for the Cardinals this season, they'll keep him around. If it's a really bad year, they might let him go pretty quick. So it's a very odd decision by Arizona, but we're going to have to wait and find out, see how it plays out. And last question here. Nicholas Thompson, do I see Sam Ehlinger as a Heisman candidate? Absolutely, I do. I do see him as one of the top quarterbacks in the nation, actually. I mean, Tua Tagovailoa is up there. Trevor Lawrence is up there for me. Some people have Jake Fromm. One of our last live streams, we actually listed our top 10 quarterbacks, or a list of top 10 quarterbacks that 24/7 Sports had put out. Tagovailoa was there, Trevor Lawrence, Jake Fromm, Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, guys like that. But Ehlinger was in there. I want to say he was around 5th. And I certainly do see him as one of the top quarterbacks in the nation. Accounted for a lot of the yards for Texas last year. I think over 70% of their offensive production came from Ehlinger last year. And I think he kind of got snubbed as being a Heisman contender. So this year, he is certainly up there. Still getting a little underrated, not getting enough attention, but it's going to be the big deal for Texas. If he can stay healthy and play the way he did last year, Texas is going to be extremely tough to beat in Big 12 play. And that game against both Iowa State and Oklahoma are going to be huge, not just for the Longhorns' success, but for the shape of the Big 12 standings and who the Longhorns could potentially face if they can even get there in the Big 12 championship. So it's going to be a very exciting year for Texas, but no doubt Ehlinger is a Heisman contender in my eyes. So guys, thank you so much for watching today. I know sometimes it's difficult to come in for a live stream in the middle of the afternoon. And as I mentioned, when summer comes around, when the off season rolls around, we'll be doing more of these things at night. Kind of prime time, as I would say, so you guys can join us a little bit more. We can have a little bit more discussion. Maybe even have these streams a little bit longer because I'll be out of school. No worries in the world, right? At least that's what they tell me. So thank you guys for watching. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe. Help us get to 2,000 subscribers by the end of May. We are just 150 subscribers away. So tell your friends, tell your families, tell your coworkers. Help us out. Get us to 2,000. Mike, I appreciate you, man. So we will see you Thursday as well. I'm glad you're able to join in. Thank you so much for stopping by. I appreciate everything you do. You guys have a great rest of the day, and we will see you guys again on Thursday.